Hi, I'm Ashley and welcome to my channel. So the time of filming this video, it is October 13th, which means that spooky season is in full swing. And so in this video, I'm going to be reading all the spooky and gothic fantasy books. So my TBR for this video is quite ambitious, and my plan is to hopefully get this video up on Halloween. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to all of these by then, but I'm just going to read as many as I can. And so let's go over my TBR. So the first book I have here is The Library of Shadows by Rachel Moore. And this is a YA fantasy with dark academia and supernatural vibes that takes place in a library. And the second book I have here is A Multitude of Dreams by Mara Rutherford. And this is a gothic YA fantasy that is inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. And I actually picked up this one last year at Barnes & Noble with the intent of reading it during spooky season, but never got to it. So hopefully I'll get to it in this video. And then the third book I have here is Castle of the Curse by Romina Garba. And this is a YA gothic fantasy. The next book I have is a manga, Devil's Candy. And I picked this one up at the library because I've had this bookmark from the series, like, forever. I don't even remember how I got this. So when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the manga that I have the bookmark for. So I had to pick it up, and it takes place at a monster academy, so it's perfect for this time of year. And then the next book I have is a graphic novel and is Over My Dead Body by Sweeney Boo. And this one I also picked up last year with every intent of reading it last year during spooky season, but never got around to it. So hopefully in this video I will be able to read this. This one has witches and dark academia vibes. And then the final book on my TBR for this video is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saff. And this one I have actually already started and I'm almost done. I have a little less than 100 pages. And this one has dark academia and gothic fantasy vibes. And so those are all the books that I am hoping to get to in this video, but we shall see because, as I said, it is an ambitious TBR. And I'm going to start by finishing A Dark and Drowning Tide, and once I finish this, I'll be back to share my thoughts. Hi, so it's the next day, it's now Monday, and I am back with a reading update. So I did finish A Dark and Drowning Tide yesterday, so let's talk about this. So originally I wasn't planning to pick up this book, but a couple weeks ago when I went to Vermont, I was at a bookstore there and I saw this and I picked it up and I started looking through it and I was intrigued, so I ended up buying it. And this author, Alison Saff, I've read 2 of her other books. So I read A Far Wilder Magic last year, which that one was okay. It wasn't my favorite. But then earlier this year, I read A Fragile Enchantment. And this book I absolutely loved. Now that being said, this one clearly has darker vibes than this one. This one I loved, like the whimsical fairy tale-like atmosphere of it. So this one obviously is like the complete opposite. It's dark and not whimsical at all. And so this one was kind of a gamble for me to pick up because her other book, A Far Wilder Magic, also had darker vibes, and that's the one that I didn't like as much. But anyways, I started leafing through this at the bookstore, and right away it started giving me Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies vibes. And this one, I love this book and series. And so our main character in this one, she is a folklorist. So like Emily, she is studying folk tales. And like Emily, she's also grumpy. And her academic arrival is sunshiny, just like Wendell is in this book. And at the beginning, there is an encounter with fairies. So that right there just really made me want to read this. And so after reading this, I'd say that it is like a teeny tiny bit like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, but it's a lot darker than this one. This one I always think of being a little bit cozy, even though it has some dark things that happen in it, but this one, no coziness, take out all the coziness. And however, unlike Emily Wilde, A Dark and Drowning Tide is not written in journal entry form, but like Emily Wilde, Lorelai, since she is a folklorist, she is often telling stories from their world throughout this book, like Emily tells stories in this one. And like Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, this book also takes part at university, but Lorelai, unlike Emily, is not a professor. She is still a student, and she is studying under an esteemed professor at the university. And even though she is a folklorist, her dream is to become a naturalist. However, this is a lot easier said than done because Lorelai is constantly facing discrimination because of her religion. So her people, they are forced to live in a certain part of the city, they have a curfew, they are not considered citizens of the kingdom, and they are looked down upon and often villainized by the other people of the kingdom. So in order for Lorelai to realize her dream of becoming a naturalist, she needs the recognition of the king. So at the beginning of this book, Lorelai, her professor, and 5 others are about to set out on an expedition where they are trying to find a fabled and magical spring for the king. And so if this expedition is successful and Lorelai is able to prove herself, then she just might be able to finally become a naturalist. However, not long after setting off on their ship, Lorelai ends up finding the professor dead in her cabin. And now Lorelai must take over leadership of the expedition, and she has to keep it moving forward while also trying to figure out who murdered her professor. And she knows that has to be one of the other 5 that are on this expedition. And the only person that she is sure is innocent is her academic arrival, Sylvia von Wolf. So it has to be one of the other 4 that are guilty. And so our story goes from there. So now for my thoughts. So while I was reading this, it was really hard for me to decide like how I felt about this book. And I think it's because I've learned this year that I just like prefer books that are whimsical and more on the happy side and more fairy tale like. But that being said, I was never bored while reading this, and after thinking about this book after finishing it yesterday, I decided that I did end up liking it overall. There were some things that I feel like that didn't quite click with me, but on the whole, I liked this. And I'd say like in comparison to Alison Saff's 2 other books, I liked it more than I did A Far Wilder Magic, but I didn't like it more than A Fragile Enchantment. And I think that's just because this is more the type of the book that I like the whimsical fairy tale like vibes. And this one was definitely darker, so there was dark academia vibes, there was Gothic fantasy vibes. This book was not a happy book, which again, I prefer happier books, but that's just the type of book this was. But like I said, I was never once bored while reading this because there's just so much going on in this book. And I feel like that was a strength of this book, but it was also a weakness because I feel like that this book at times it felt like it was trying to do too much. So you have the murder mystery element, which was very interesting, but at the same time, it felt like it didn't get as much development as it should have. And then similarly, the romance, I like how it ended, but it kind of frustrated me multiple times throughout this book while reading it. So it is very much a slow burn, like very, 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 very slow burn. And that's partially because Lorelai, she grew up being discriminated because of her religion, and so she believes that like a relationship between her and Sylvia would never work out because Sylvia is a noble and her people are regarded as being evil, and so she feels like if she had a relationship with Sylvia, she would just end up dragging Sylvia down to her level, and she doesn't want to do that. And so in order to hide her affection towards Sylvia, she treats her with bitterness. You can see that throughout the book. There is some times when Sylvia is trying to be nice to her, but Lorelai just continues to be mean to her, and so in response, Sylvia ends up shutting down and being mean back to Lorelai. And so like that dynamic between the 2 of them ends up going on for a while. And so you don't really get any development of the relationship until like around page 200, something happens. And it was actually one of the few scenes in this book that was happy and that made me smile. And it was the scene where Lorelai kind of lets down her guard a little bit and lets her true feelings show a little bit to Sylvia. And they have like a really nice moment. But even after that moment and after a love confession from Sylvia, Lorelai continues to deny the relationship because she believes that would never work out, and so she starts to be mean to Sylvia again, just like she was in the beginning. And so that's why the romance felt a little frustrating to me at times, because it just felt like it was going around in circles a little bit. Although, as I mentioned earlier, I did like how it ended up, and actually I really liked how this book ended. That was another one of the few happy moments of this book, was the ending. It was happy. And so then Lorelai as a main character, I mostly liked her, but at times her self-loathing for herself got a little bit old. And one of my favorite moments in this book is when Sylvia actually calls Lorelai out about her self-loathing. And so I just want to read that little passage where Sylvia calls out Lorelai. So it is on page 308, and Sylvia says, "Saints, Lorelai," Sylvia snapped, and it felt like an absolution. "You are human. Do you understand what's happened here? You acted the part of a villain so well, you've gone and convinced yourself it's who you truly are. You're honestly one of the least self-aware people I have ever met." And I think that paragraph sums up Lorelai's struggle throughout this book really well, because that is what she is struggling with. She is struggling with her self-image, and she's struggling with how other people's view of her people have ultimately affected how she views herself. And speaking of Sylvia, I loved her. She was one of my favorite characters in this book. She is very much the sunshine to Lorelai's grumpiness. She always tries to be positive. She always tries to work things out with talking first rather than resulting to violence. And she very much has a whimsical air to her and just like a fairy tale princess feel to her. And so I feel like she was very much a ray of light within this book that was otherwise rather dark. And I do have to say, like, the atmosphere of this book, like the dark and gloominess of it, is very much perfect for this time of year. Another element of this book that I thought was interesting but didn't feel quite fleshed out enough was the fact that Lorelai can see ghosts. So at the very beginning of the book, it's brought up that she can see ghosts, and so you think this is going to play like a big role in the book, but it really ends up not, and I feel like I would have liked more done with the fact that she can see ghosts. So those are all my thoughts on this book. I'm giving it a 3.5 because I liked it, but I didn't like love it. And I think part of that is because it's not 100% a book for me. But also I do think it did have some shortcomings. But I do think this book is a really good book to read this time of year because of the dark and gloomy atmosphere and tone. So the next book I'm going to pick up is The Library of Shadows, and I actually already started this last night because I couldn't sleep. So I am on page 48, so I'm not too far in yet, so I'm not going to give thoughts until I've read some more. But I will say that I am enjoying this so far, and I just have to read the first line of this book because I love the first line. So the first line says, "Este's new roommate was a ghost and not a particularly good one." And so that first line is just super intriguing. And so I'm going to go read more of this, and I also think I'm going to go do some journaling because I still need to do my October journal spread. So that being said, I will be back once I've read more of this and have some thoughts to share. Hi, so it's now Wednesday night and I'm here with a reading update and I'm in my silly little Mimikyu hoodie because why not? So I wanted to give an update on this yesterday, but ended up having to deal with some car stuff that ended up taking all day yesterday. So I didn't have time to film an update, but I did read more of this yesterday. So I'm more than halfway through this now and I'm now on chapter 21, page 246. And so I wanted to come and give an update on this before I finish it. And also, I wanted to give an update tonight because tomorrow my husband and I are leaving to go to a hotel because we are attending an anime convention on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this week. So after today, I probably won't have time for another update until next week sometime. So let me tell you a little bit about what this book is about, and then I'll give my thoughts so far. So this book follows Este Logano, and at the beginning of the book, she is moving into her dorm room at Radcliffe Prep. And Radcliffe Prep is an exclusive school for 11th and 12th graders who are planning on going to an Ivy League college. And it's also the nation's third most haunted high school, and over the years, 8 students have gone missing. But neither of these reasons are why Este wants to attend the school. So Este's father passed away 3 years ago, and she still very much misses him, and he attended Radcliffe Prep, and so she chose the school with the hopes of being able to feel closer to her father. And she ends up getting accepted to the school with a full scholarship. However, things end up taking an unexpected turn on move-in day when Este ends up finding a key hidden in the back of a picture frame of a photo of her and her father. And she has no idea what this key goes to. But a mysterious upperclassman named Matteo does know, and he tells her that is the key to the spire. And the spire is the one place in the library that is forbidden to the students. And Matteo says that since Este has the key, they should go check it out. Of course, Este is very weary because it's against the rules and it's her first day, so she doesn't want to get in trouble on her first day. But then Matteo says, hey, your father was the last person to use this key and the last person to be in the spire in 30 years. So Este's curiosity and her wanting to feel closer to her father end up making her decide to go along with Matteo to the spire. And so they make it up to the room, but not long after they enter the spire, the head librarian ends up showing up. And also, Matteo ends up mysteriously disappearing, and he takes this one-of-a-kind book with him. And so the librarian is furious, because not only is Este not where she is supposed to be, but also now there is a one-of-a-kind rare book missing. So the librarian is ready to expel Este from the school. But Este pleads with her, saying that if she gives her another chance, then she will find the book for the librarian. And so the librarian ends up giving in to Estei's pleas on 2 conditions: that she has to work late nights in the library and that she has to give the librarian weekly updates on her progress of finding the book. And so then our story goes from there. And so now for my thoughts, I am very much enjoying this. One of my favorite things about the book so far is definitely the atmosphere. It's very much giving fall and spooky season vibes. It takes place in the fall time in Vermont, and the setting of a haunted library is just giving all the spooky vibes. And so this is like a perfect book for this time of year. And I'm really loving the whole mystery aspect that is going on. So there are some good ghosts and some bad ghosts, and then there is someone apparently controlling the bad ghosts. And so I've been just like trying to figure out who it is. And I'm at the point in the book where they're kind of saying, oh, we think it's this person. But I have a feeling that it's not actually that person and it's actually someone else. But maybe I'm wrong, but that's the feeling I'm getting right now. So I'm really invested in this mystery in seeing exactly who is the one who is controlling the bad ghosts. And also add into like the spooky atmosphere of the book, Estei's roommate is really into ghost hunting, and she actually ends up forming a paranormal investigation club. So that is also another really fun part of the book. And then another element of the book that I'm really enjoying is the romance that is in here that is between Estei and Matteo. So the romance is just like a very small part of the book, and so it's just sprinkled throughout the book, but what we have got so far has just been so like cute and sweet and wholesome. And I actually have 2 passages from the book that I want to share with you that relate to the romance and that just make my heart really happy. So the first passage is on page 152, and it reads, "And for the tiniest fraction of a second, Matteo looked at her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Surprise and something softer. Like the first time someone remembered your favorite song or ordered you a chocolate shake because they knew you liked to dip your fries in it. The look of knowing someone and being known right back." So that's the first one, and that one just made me smile. And then the second passage is on page 193, and it's something Matteo says about love. So he says, "When you love someone, it's like building a library and filling the shelves. It doesn't matter how many years it's been since Austen wrote Emma or Fitzgerald wrote This Side of Paradise. We can still pull them from the bookcases and dive back into the words, the same as the day they were written. All the years and memories are still right here, cataloged inside us." And so I just really liked that passage as well, and I liked how it was related to books because Estei is also an avid reader. She loves to read, and it seems like Matteo does as well. And so those are all my thoughts so far. It has been a very fun read, and I'm really invested in the mystery and the romance, and I'm just excited to see where it goes and how everything ends up. Hi, so it's now Sunday, October 22nd, and I am here to do a quick reading update before I have to head off to work this morning. So my last update was over a week ago, and I was planning to update on Thursday, which was my day off. But I had to run some errands, and then I ended up getting a migraine that day, so that kind of just like derailed my whole day. So I'm here now. So I did finish reading Library of Shadows last Thursday, and I had to return that book to the library, so I don't have the physical copy anymore, but I'll just post a picture of it up here. And I realized this morning too that currently this book is available on Kindle Unlimited. But anyways, I ended up very much enjoying Library of Shadows. The last 100 pages of that book, so many things happened. And in my last update, I said that the romance had only played a small part in the story, but in those last 100 pages, the romance really took center stage. And I ended up really loving the romance between Estei and Matteo. The romance was just super cute and sweet, and I liked how everything ended. This book is a standalone, so the book does wrap up everything at the end very nicely. And overall, I would definitely recommend this book. It's a perfect atmospheric read for spooky season because you have a haunted library and ghosts, but also I feel like it's just a good book for people who love books in general because it very much feels almost like a love letter to libraries and books. And so I am giving Library of Shadows 4 stars. After reading Library of Shadows, I picked up A Multitude of Dreams, and I'm actually almost done with this. So I have made it to chapter 28, page 261, So I have just slightly over 100 pages left of this book, and so far I am really enjoying this one as well. Out of all the books I've read for this video so far, this book has definitely had the creepiest, eeriest vibes. And that does make sense because this is inspired by an Edgar Allan Poe story, The Mask of the Red Death, which I know I read that back in high school, I think, but it's been so long that I don't really remember what it was about. And when I think of Edgar Allan Poe, the two works of his that I remember the most are his poem The Raven and the short story The Telltale Heart. So this book follows two main characters and you get both their perspectives. And according to the inside flap, our first character's name is Princess Imogen. But then when you start chapter 1 and this book is in third person perspective, the main female character is called Seraphina, so it's already like, what is going on? But when people talk to her, they call her Princess Imogen. Princess Imogen is the youngest daughter of the king in this book. However, you soon learn at the beginning of the book that Princess Imogen had actually died. So she caught this plague called the Mori Roja, or the Bloody Three. And she died, but her sisters were afraid that her death would cause the king to go insane, so they end up finding Seraphina, who kind of looks like her, to stand as a stand-in for her. So for the last 4 years, Seraphina has pretended to be Princess Imogen. And for the last 4 years, the king, his daughters, and some other nobles have been locked away in the castle because of the Mori Roja Bloody Three plague. But now finally, at the start of the story, the plague has finally dissipated. And so Seraphina really wants nothing more than to leave the castle to try to figure out if her real parents and her best friend are still alive. And then our second main character is Nico. And so his entire family was killed by the plague, but he survived because there are certain people that are immune to the plague, and he is one of those. And even though he survived, he still almost died of starvation. And he's only alive because another noble, Lord Crane, found him and brought him back to his manor. And so Nico has lived with Lord Crane for the last 3 or 4 years. But at the beginning of the story, strange things start happening, and Nico ends up questioning how well he actually knows Lord Crane, because there seems like there is something not quite right with how Lord Crane is acting. So we end up following Seraphina and Nico's separate stories until their stories end up meeting up around page 159, when Lord Crane ends up sending Nico and a couple other young men out to find out if there are any survivors at the castle. And so our story goes from there. And so, as I said, so far I am really enjoying this. It did take me like a little bit to get into it, but not too long, and now I am definitely hooked to this story, and I just want to know how everything is going to play out. And so far, there hasn't really been much romance, though I do think Seraphina and Nico might end up being together in the end, because it's clear that they are kind of like the romantic pairing in this story. But this story itself has just been like so interesting, and I'm just trying to figure out what is going on, that I don't really care that there hasn't been a lot of romance. And so far, this is really giving me the vibes that House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin Craig gave me. What is funny is that Erin Craig actually shouts out the book on the front of the cover here. She says, "Dripping with bloody opulence, a multitude of dreams creeps up on you like a sly shadow." So I just thought it was really cool that she shouted out this book, because this book reminds me a lot of her books. Which is a very good thing, because she's one of my favorite authors. So yeah, those are my thoughts so far about this. I will be back with my final thoughts once I finish it. Hi, so it is now Tuesday, October 27th, so we are only 2 days away from Halloween, which is insane. And I know I wanted originally to get up this video on Halloween, but that's just not gonna happen. I feel like I've just been like so busy this month that I haven't had as much time to read as I wanted to, so I feel like this video keeps getting derailed. That being said, I'm still gonna post it because I really want to share my thoughts about these books I've been reading, and so it'll probably just end up going up the second Sunday in November, which is fine. It is what it is. But anyways, I have some reading updates for you. So this morning, I did finish A Multitude of Dreams. I'm giving this 4.5 stars. It was almost a 5-star read, but not quite there. I did end up really enjoying this. It definitely has that creepy and suspenseful atmosphere that is perfect for this time of year, but even with that creepiness, there were just also some really wholesome and heartwarming moments between characters in here that I just loved. And the story in here was just so well done, and I was definitely on the edge of my seat while reading this the whole time because I was trying to figure out what was going to happen, how things were going to play out, and I just had a lot of fun reading this. And so in the story, things just keep building and building until we like reach the climax in the last 100 pages of the book, and just like things got crazy in here, and I loved it. And I also ended up loving our two main characters, Nico and Serafina, in here. I thought they were really well developed and complex characters that had layers. So Nico, he is very much a Cinnamon Bun character. He's just a really nice guy, and he had always wanted to be a doctor even before the plague. And he had two older brothers who were very much like the manly type, and his father always used to belittle him because he is more like soft-hearted and more emotional. So he had to deal with that before the plague, but his mother was always like his biggest champion and always supported him. And unfortunately, she passed away during the plague. But when Nico meets Serafina, the two of them actually form a genuine connection. It was just so heartwarming to see them connect and to see them each accept each other's true selves. So like Nico, I also love Serafina. She is definitely not a damsel in distress. Like, she has to pretend to be a princess and be a damsel in distress sometimes in the story, but towards the end, like, her fiery personality like shines through, and she very much takes matters into her own hands. She doesn't wait for someone to come rescue her, and I love that about her. But also, like, at the same time, she is also, like Nico, dealing with insecurities as well. It isn't until, like, she meets Nico that she starts to come to terms with her insecurities. And then the two of them together, there is a little bit of romance in here. Like, it's really just a small part of the story, but it was super cute. Although, towards the end, there was a kinda spicy scene. Not quite, but a little bit for YA. And it felt a little long to me. Like, I feel like it didn't have to be as long as it was, but that was really my only gripe with this entire book. And this book is a standalone, and the ending, it wrapped everything up really well, and I really loved how it ended overall. And so I definitely recommend this, especially if you like Gothic fantasy or if you like Edgar Allan Poe, because this is inspired by one of his stories. So after reading this morning, I did pick up Devil's Candy, and I read the first chapter of this, and I don't know, I'm not really feeling it so far. I feel like it might not be for me. I just feel like it might be one of those stories that doesn't really have a plot line, and I've only read one chapter, but so far the characters seem a little generic to me, but again, I've only read one chapter. It also seems the type of story that's more on the goofier, sillier side, which I feel like isn't what I'm really looking for right now. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read one more chapter and then decide if I want to continue on with the rest or not. So this story, it follows characters who are devils who go to this school for devils. And so our main character, Kaz, he's really into science. And so for biology class, with the help of his friend, he creates this girl right here who he ends up naming Pandora. And it's apparent early on that maybe he created her for a science project, but he also created her because he seems kind of lonely and just wants a friend. So in the first chapter, there ends up being some trouble that happens in their biology class with one of the other students, and Pandora ends up saving the day. And so far, it seems like the story is just going to be like the adventures of Kazu and Pandora. So that is that. Like I said, I'm going to give it one more chapter and see what I think, and if I'm not feeling it, then I'm just going to put it down. But I am off work today, so my plans for the rest of the day, I do want to start Castle of the Cursed, But I also want to go on a walk today because there's this like little park that isn't far from my apartment, and there's a lot of trees over there, so I have a feeling like the trees might be really pretty right now, or they might not be, but I want to go find out. Hi, so I am back with a reading update. Today is Sunday, November 3rd, which October is over. Halloween has come and gone, and now we're in November, which is crazy and also makes me kind of sad. Because my favorite month of the year is over, and technically spooky season is now technically over. But let's talk about Castle of the Curse, because I did finish reading this today. I wanted to do an update while I was reading this, but my life has just been so hectic this past week that I haven't really had the chance. So I'm just giving all my final thoughts now. So first off, I want to say that this book does have trigger warnings at the beginning of it, so check those out because this is probably by far like the darkest book that I've read in this video. It's like psychologically very dark, so do make sure you check out the trigger warnings at the beginning of this to make sure you're in the right mindset to read this. Because our main character in the beginning of this book, Estella, she is not in a good place at all. This is because in the prologue of the story, you find out 7 months before the start of the book that she was involved in an incident in which 25 people died, including her parents, and she was the only survivor. This happened on the subway, and no one's really sure what happened, except that the 25 passengers all died from apparently heart attacks, but Estella thinks that something else might have happened, and she doesn't know why she's the only survivor. She just knows that before everything happened, she saw black smoke. However, when she recounts what happened to her on the subway and she tells the people that she saw black smoke, everyone thinks like that's just her dealing with trauma. So ever since this happened, she has been living at a state mental health center for minors because her parents were her only family, and so she doesn't have any relatives that she knows of. The thing is though, she is going to be 18 in a couple of months, so once she turns 18 she won't be able to stay at this center anymore. However, the government ends up tracking down her aunt who lives in Spain. And so Estella doesn't know this aunt at all. She didn't even know she had family in Spain. So now she is going off to live with her aunt who lives in Spain, who lives in a castle. And right from the beginning, when Estella gets to Spain and to the small town of Esquero where the castle is, she can tell that something isn't right about the town or about the castle. And the town is one of those places where people have lived there for generations and they don't really get any newcomers. As such, the town is a very close-knit community, and you also learn that there's no church in this town, and that's very weird for like a small town in Spain. And you learn every time they had tried to build a church over the years, it just collapsed. And instead, the people of the town worship the castle where Estella's aunt lives. And this castle very much gives off creepy and sinister vibes, and it seems like it is almost alive. And Estella's aunt is also not very welcoming in the beginning. She's cold, and she is supposedly the doctor in town, and so Estella, while she was at the mental health center, she was on medication, and so now her aunt's in charge of her medication. But instead of giving Estella her usual pill, she gives her this black seed-like thing and says that that's her medicine for now on. Her aunt tells her that there are 2 rules that she must abide by, and those are she cannot go anywhere in the castle that her aunt hasn't shown her. Number 2, she cannot invite anyone over to the castle. And so, of course, that first night, Estella breaks rule number 1 and she goes exploring in the castle. And she eventually ends up running into someone else in the castle, and this being is clearly not human. They are a vampire, which isn't a spoiler because it's on the inside flap of the book. He actually attacks Estella because he is trapped in the castle and he believes that Estella is the one who put him there because she is the only one who can see him and hear him. Also turns out that he became trapped at the castle at the same time that the incident occurred on the subway. And eventually the 2 of them end up forming a partnership because Stella believes that there is a connection between his curse and what happened to her parents. And she wants to know what happened to her parents, and is pretty much the only thing that is getting her through the days at this point is her desire to know what happened to her parents. So our story goes from there. And so now for my thoughts. So I have many mixed feelings about this book. There were things that I liked, but then there was also things that I didn't like. So let's start off with one thing that I really liked, and my favorite part of the book was the castle. I love the creepy, sinister, haunted vibes of the castle. They were A+. I thought the history behind the castle was very interesting, and that the original owner of the castle wasn't quite human, and also a long time ago, the owner of the castle used to throw like these midnight parties, but all the guests who went to the parties never left the castle and were never seen again. And then in the same vein, the other thing I really liked about this book was just trying to figure out what was going on, trying to figure out what was up with the castle, what happened to Estella's parents, and just like trying to unravel all the mysteries of the book. But that being said, so this book did have a plot twist that I did not see coming, but at the same time, I didn't really like the plot twist. It just felt like it was trying to do too much for a standalone book. And it felt like the story felt a little rushed towards the end too as well. And then my biggest problem with this book, though, was the romance. So you can probably guess from the synopsis that the love interest is indeed the vampire who's trapped in the castle. And I liked him as a character. I thought his backstory was very interesting. Romance definitely had a lot of potential. Let's start off with him trying to kill her because of a misunderstanding. So you have a little bit of like the enemies to lovers vibes going on there, kinda, just a teeny tiny bit. Then that is resolved and they become allies in trying to figure out his curse and what happened to Estella's parents. And then they start to become friends. But then all of a sudden they go from becoming friends to suddenly being in love with each other. This happened all too fast, and so I didn't feel the connection between them, and it didn't feel believable. That being said, there were also a couple of scenes that were a little bit steamy, and those scenes just made me feel even more disconnected to the romance as well. However, at the same time, even though I didn't really like the romance, I still wanted Estella and this vampire to be together in the end. And I think that's because Estella has just been through so much and like she's just pretty much lost everyone that she cares about at this point, that I want her to have someone that she cares about and that cares about her. And like I said, I liked his character and I like Estella as a character. It just felt like their relationship moved way too fast. I understand it's a standalone book, so there's only so much time to develop a relationship, but Library of Shadows was also a standalone and the romance in that was a little bit of a slow burn, and it was really, really good. It was really well done, so I wish this book could have done that. And since it is a standalone, everything does wrap up pretty well in the ending. The only problem I have with the ending is the last 3 lines of the book. Nope, just the last 3 lines. I do not like them at all. They just need to not exist. I feel like the last 3 lines of the book tried to do something, tried to go for a certain tone, but it just didn't work because of everything that came before it. And I just feel like those last 3 lines, they just should not have been there. And so yeah, those are all my thoughts on Castle of the Cursed. I kind of didn't enjoy it that much. I think it had a lot of potential, but it just kind of fell short, and I really wished that it had lived up to that potential. Because it always makes me sad when a book doesn't live up to the potential. Like, it had potential to be really good, and then it wasn't. But that being said, those are just my own personal opinions about this book. And if it sounds interesting to you, then you should check it out, because you might have different opinions than me. Alright, so with that, let's just quickly wrap up this vlog by going over all the books that I read in this video, and let's talk about them in order of my least favorite to favorite. First, I just want to mention that I never did read Over My Dead Body. I haven't read this yet, and I'm just not in the mood, so I'm not going to force it, so I'm just going to put this aside until another time. And then similarly, I never went back to read any more Devil's Candy, which is fine. Again, I don't want to force it. I'm just gonna return this to the library, and if I ever feel like picking up again, then I know where to find it. And then of the books I read, my least favorite was Castle of the Cursed for reasons I just discussed. And then next, A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saff. This one I gave a 3.5 because there are things I liked, but there was also things that I didn't like. But I really liked the dark, spooky atmosphere in this one. Then the last 2 books that I read was A Library of Shadows and A Multitude of Dreams. And for these 2, I actually think it's a tie with how much I like them. I believe in my review of Library of Shadows, I gave it a 4, but I keep thinking about that book, so I'm raising it to a 4.5, and I gave this one a 4.5. So Library of Shadows, I just loved the spooky library setting, and I also ended up really loving the romance in that one, which I wasn't expecting to love the romance as much as I did, but I ended up loving it, and that one was my favorite romance out of all these books that I read. And then this one, again, the gothic spooky atmosphere and setting in this one was A+. And I forgot to mention this when I was talking about this one, but there is a creepy nursery rhyme in this, and it just gave me the chills. I feel like now it's just gonna forever live in my brain. But this one, I really liked our 2 main characters. I think they were very well developed and layered characters. And this, overall story of this one was just very well done. as was the overall story of the Library of Shadows as well. So those are all the books I read in this video. This video will be coming out after spooky season is over, but I hope you still enjoy it. Let me know down below if you read any of these, what you thought about them. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye!